In my face-to-face coaching, I talk with a lot of people that are recently out of toxic relationships, whether it's their parents, family members, or an intimate or significant other. And one of the top things that they're battling is loneliness. I want to talk today about what loneliness is and is not, right? Clear up any misconceptions. I also want to talk about why loneliness is harder for people that have been through toxic relationships. Not that I'm putting any kind of competition as to who feels lonely or who is more lonely, but there is a different dynamic that goes on with people that have undergone narcissistic abuse. So I want to explain that, because when we understand these things, when we get the emotional literacy for them, then we're able to work through them better with healthier coping skills. So with that in mind, for those of you that don't know me, my name is Michele and I'm a life coach, and I help people break through subconscious programming so that they can become their authentic self. If that's a topic that you find interesting, make sure that you subscribe to my channel and hit the bell icon, because I put out videos every week. Okay, so first I want to clear up any misconceptions as to what loneliness is. So sometimes we might think that we're lonely when we're alone or when we're not in a relationship. But I want to completely show you that that is not true. Okay, so if you've ever been in an intimate relationship with a toxic person, pause for a moment and ask yourself, while I was in that relationship, did I feel emotionally connected? Or did I feel lonely? I know many people that tell me that for those that married a narcissist, they'll tell me, Michele, the day I got married was the loneliest day of my life, because the narcissist or the toxic person is externally focused on everyone but their significant other. So that shows that being in a relationship does not mean an automatic end to loneliness. Now think about a time when you were doing something alone, right? You were doing something that you were passionate about and you felt fulfilled, at peace. Think about that. What comes to mind with me is I remember when there was a time when I felt like I had hit rock bottom, where it was the worst time in my life, and I learned to paint, right? I just taught myself to paint. I remember having that paintbrush in my hand, and it didn't matter. It didn't matter what was going on. At that moment, I felt peace. I felt passion, things that I hadn't felt in a long time. And that came from a time when at those moments I was alone. So what I'm trying to clear up is the fact that that painful loneliness that comes up at the end of a toxic relationship is not necessarily because you are not in a relationship or because you are physically alone. So now let's talk about why it's different, that loneliness, why it's different for people that have been through toxic relationships. For people that have a relatively healthy life, and I say relatively because no one is perfectly healthy nowadays, but for people that have a relatively healthy life, they still feel lonely when they don't have strong emotional connections with people, right? That's normal to kind of feel a little bit disconnected if you don't have those close friendships, close relationships, okay? People that have been through toxic relationships, the reason why the loneliness is so much more intense is because often, like those other individuals, you don't have close relationships externally because the toxic person in your life isolated you, probably from your family members and close friends that you had before you entered the relationship. So you don't have those external relationships that you can count on. On top of that, and this is where the real pain of loneliness comes from, on top of that, you were trained and conditioned to not have that healthy relationship with self. So think about it. As a child, you were probably made to feel that you had to do, be, say, think, and feel whatever your toxic caregiver expected from you, which meant you were a human doing, not a human being, and your needs, your thoughts, your wants, your desires, your passions were either invalidated, ignored, made fun of, criticized, or verbally abused. or you were attacked or made to feel selfish and a bad person for having your own thoughts, feelings, and desires. So what does a child do when that caregiver is conditioning them to do that? They disconnect from self. Having a self becomes painful. Having their own thoughts, their own actions, their own passions becomes something that they're attacked for, so they begin associating that with pain and they eliminate it. So now, not only do you not have external healthy relationships, but you have no connection to self either. That is an extremely painful and lonely place to be. On top of that, toxic relationships take away your sense of agency. Our sense of agency is feeling in control of our life. We feel that we can influence our thoughts, our actions, our behaviors to go in a direction that we want to go in. We feel a sense of control over ourselves. If you've been in a toxic relationship, you don't feel in control of yourself. A big part of trauma is making a person feel a loss of control. So you don't feel in control of your thoughts. You don't feel in control of your actions. You do not feel in control of your life. It's a very scary place to be. So not only do you have a healthy sense of self, but now your sense of agency, your ability to empower yourself has been taken away. That's another reason why the loneliness is so unbearable. The mistakes that people make when they're trying to overcome this kind of loneliness to come quickly to mind. The first mistake I think that people make is thinking that they have to be in a relationship. So sometimes they'll have worked so hard to remove themselves from a relationship that was ultimately destroying them, and they'll jump back in because they think, oh my goodness, this loneliness, it doesn't get worse than this. That at least is better than this. And they'll make the mistake of going back to something that is very emotionally, psychologically, physically, spiritually destroying them. Or the other way that they handle it is they try to become so busy. They try to do, because in their minds, value is being a human doing and not a human being. So they're trying to busy themselves to the point that they don't feel this loneliness. The problem is that loneliness, it's like our shadow. You can't go anywhere where the sun is shining and not see your shadow. It's impossible. It's always following you. That loneliness will always be there until you heal it. So how do you do that? The first thing that's helpful, I think, is to realize that whatever you're searching for outside is not going to fill you within. Because if you don't fulfill yourself from within, you're like a cup that has a hole in it, and you're trying to have everyone pour into your cup, and it's just, going out the other end. So we have to heal that hole that's inside. Some of the ways that we do that is we start looking at ourselves and how we can regain a sense of empowerment and control over ourselves, over our thoughts, over our actions, over our belief system, over our sense of identity, over having the ability to be our autonomous selves. Because if you were in a toxic relationship, you couldn't do any of that for a really long time. You couldn't be autonomous. You couldn't be your own person. You were punished for that. So starting to become and live life as your authentic self, you start to begin to develop your self-identity. You start to strengthen your sense of self. You strengthen your self-love. You strengthen your ability to feel present in your own body. When we begin feeding our self-love, our feelings of loneliness starve to death.